And joining me now, somebody with a thing or two to say about all this, our favorite Congressman Jim Jordan from Ohio, ranking member of the Judiciary Committee. And you are going to be Johnny on the spot, Mr. Jim Jordan. I just want to start. There's a good story about you today. You are questioning whether the Supreme Court decision, West Virginia versus the EPA, and all these regulations they're promulgating is, in fact, being implemented. And the chances are they're not. But why don't you tell us, because I think this is a key part of this Biden energy story.
Well, not only does the left want to get rid of oil and gas in our country and think that, you know, it's rainbows and unicorns and solar and wind that are going to provide the energy we need for the greatest economy in history, they also want the, quote, experts, the bureaucrats in the government making decisions, not the elected officials. And that Supreme Court decision was real clear. Congress passes the laws, and the bureaucracy and the, quote, experts can't do what they want. They got to follow the law. And they went way too far with the EPA in this West Virginia case. So we want to make sure other agencies are adhering to the standard and the conclusion of that important Supreme Court case, because we know how bad the Justice Department has become, how political they've become. We want to know in other areas, are they doing the same things that the Supreme Court said the EPA couldn't do in that amazing decision they gave us this past year?
I mean, Jim Jordan, it's you know, the phrase vast economic and political significance, quote unquote, which was part of the Supreme Court decision. I mean, my sense of it is that will apply across the board. And you've got all these federal agencies setting up all these, you know, ESGs and diversity boards and Lord knows what they're doing, and promulgating regulations that do have vast economic and political impact, and they're not paying any heed to the Supremes. I mean, this thing is a very big deal. And Joe Biden is kind of hinting at this anyway. I mean, it's as though nothing happened, even though it was only a few months ago.
Yeah, and you talked about what they're trying to do, the oil and gas industry, and trying to basically keep investors from investing in that important industry, that essential industry for us to have the thriving economy that you and I want us to have, and that we had, frankly, when you were in the White House helping President Trump just a couple years ago, and look what we have at this moment. But it's also, remember, who was the expert who ran our lives for the last couple years? It was Dr. Fauci with all his pronunciations, all his edicts and everything else. I mean, that's not how it's supposed to work. It's supposed to be the folks that we, the people, put in office, specifically the United States Congress, who make the rules, who make the laws, and we follow those laws. The agencies have their place, but their place is not to make the law, not to go past what the law says. That's an important concept. And frankly, if what happens in 7 days is what I think it's going to be, we need to make sure we focus on this and hold those agencies to account and make sure they don't go any further than they already have.
Well, let's go a little deeper on that. If what we think is going to happen happens, you're going to wind up being chairman of the Judiciary Committee. It's an incredibly important and powerful spot. And I guess my question is, will you undergo investigations that will get at the heart of the weaponization, the political weaponization, Jim Jordan? And I'm thinking of the Justice Department, I'm thinking of the FBI, I'm thinking of a whole bunch of agencies, probably the IRS. I mean, this has gone beyond anything we've ever seen. The Obama years were tough, but the political weaponization of these agencies are crucial, and I'm assuming you got a lot of plans for them.
Yeah, I just had a question from what I hope to be a future constituent here in the 4th District of Ohio, and they said, what's the biggest thing that scares you? And look, I said, we can recover from the crazy things they've done to our border where we no longer have a border. We can recover from the record inflation and the energy situation. But if they fundamentally change the Department of Justice like they're now trying, to where we no longer have equal treatment under the law, that doesn't work in this great country, the greatest nation ever. You have to have a Justice Department that's not political, not focused on going after their political opposition. So we will look into all that. We will look into what whistleblowers have told us that's going on there. We have to have a Justice Department that treats every American the same, equal treatment under the law. Not what we saw, for example, where this pro-life activist outside of Philadelphia, where the FBI kicked in his door, arrested him in front of his wife and 7 kids for something that the local judge says wasn't a crime, and the local law enforcement said we shouldn't prosecute. But the FBI did that. And at the same time, when there are hundreds of churches and pro-life centers that have been attacked, the Justice Department seems to do nothing. So that has got to change. We are going to get to the bottom of that. We've done hundreds of letters asking for all kinds of information. We're going to pursue that and make sure we get the facts and the truth and hold them accountable and stop a Justice Department that's been focused on politics.
And I assume that's going to include this whole issue of calling parents domestic terrorists with respect to their kids' education.
Yeah. I mean, Larry, I'd like to know. I'm sure you would. This was the very first issue a whistleblower came and talked to us about, an agent came and talked to us about. I'd like to know the conversations that we know these conversations took place to the school board associations before they ever sent the letter to Merrick Garland on September 29th. I want to know what they were saying with the White House. We know they talked to the White House. We know they talked to the Justice Department. We know they talked to the Department of Education. And the letter, we believe, was just the pretext to do what they wanted to do, which was to try to chill the speech of moms and dads. So I want to get all the information about people who were talked to prior to the letter ever being sent, which became the reason for Merrick Garland's memo 5 days later, which then 16 days later, the FBI sends out the email, says put this designation, this tag, this threat tag label on moms and dads. And as a result of that process they put in place, over 24 parents were investigated. I mean, one of the simple questions I always ask is, September 29th is the letter, October 4th is the memo, October 20th is the email to FBI agents around the country. All that happened in 22 days. When have you ever seen the federal government move that fast? But when it came time to go after their political opposition, oh my goodness, the speed and the urgency with which they did that, that is frightening. So yeah, that's one of the issues we're going to look at as well as part of this overall political nature that's now exists at our Justice Department, trying to satisfy this narrative, by the way, Larry. This narrative that President Biden said in front of Independence Hall when he called half the country extremists, that's what they're focused on. Agents tell us that time and time again when they come to us as whistleblowers.
I mean, you know, Senator Ted Cruz has a very good book out about the weaponization of the Justice Department and the FBI, and I'm going to get to the IRS in a minute. And it's a very useful read. I mean, Richard Nixon is very culpable. He tried to manipulate. But in those days, these bureaucracies seemed to fight back. Nowadays, particularly under Obama and even worse under Biden, they don't fight back. And I guess I'm asking you as the head of judiciary, can you do a top-to-bottom investigation and overhaul of the FBI, which is not doing its job and has become a political weapon?
Yeah, that is our intent. That's what we're going to do. We're going to start right away. We've already laid, I think, a lot of groundwork with the people we've identified that need to be talked to, people who we need to get information from. So, yes, that's what we're going to do. But I'll tell you, one of the things that's going to come up next year, I think we're going to win next Tuesday. And I think the Senate's going to go to Republicans as well. One of the things that comes up next year is the reauthorization of FISA. I don't think we should reauthorize that. In light of what we've seen from the FBI, in light of what they've done, my colleague, Larry, had a great line. Matt Gaetz in committee hearing about a month ago, he said this: when is the FBI not going to interfere in an election? In 2016, they spied on President Trump's campaign. 2018, it was the Mueller investigation. 2020, they suppressed the Hunter Biden story. And in 2022, 91 days before the election, they raided the home of a former president. Why doesn't the FBI just let we, the people, decide who's going to lead us, who's going to represent us, instead of always trying to weigh in and factor in an election? Just let the people decide. And
the last one, Jim Jordan, the political weaponization of the IRS, which is a very dangerous thing. The last bill, the inflation reduction bill, the inflation expansion bill, 87,000 new agents, $80 billion. The IRS doesn't need it. They sure don't deserve it. But it has become a political weapon. And is this going to be part of your investigations as chair of the Judiciary Committee?
Yeah, this is something, Leader McCarthy is exactly right. He says if we take back the House, the first bill we're going to pass is to take away the money that would fund those 87,000 IRS agents. I think that is exactly right. This needs to, remember, the first big investigation of the last decade that really caught everyone's attention was when the IRS targeted conservatives. Lois Lerner and Barack Obama's administration was going after conservative groups. So, yeah, this is something we have to look into. That will probably be done, though, frankly, in the Ways and Means Committee. Under our new Republican chairman there, not in the Judiciary Committee, but it's something that does concern, I think, all Americans, because this agency, like the Justice Department, can have such an impact on our lives. And if they're targeting their political opposition, that is frightening.
All right, well, good luck on the campaign trail. You're going to have your hands full, Mr. Chairman, but I know you're ready to do it. Jim Jordan, thank you, sir, as always.